The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, and this is Carl Seidel of the People's View, and this time we're going to do something different. We have 5 people who are grouping themselves as a team to try to get elected on the Board of Education. So I'll ask them to introduce themselves right now.
I'm Doris Hohensee. I'm currently on the Board of Education.
I'm Paula Johnson, former member of the Board of Education, Board of Aldermen, and former state rep.
I'm Greg Serby, a professional investor and an IT professional.
Howard Kaufman, currently on the Board of Ed.
Bert Jans, a previous candidate for Board of Ed. I've lived in Nashua since 1982.
Well, thank you all for taking time to come together. I think this is a unique presentation, but I think you all have a theme. And Doris, maybe you can sort of start off with what you're going to do as a group.
Well, we have a pledge, and we've all are pledging to restore adherence to board policy and state law, to provide accountability, civility, and transparency, to focus on reading, writing, and math, and respect parental rights. We also want to focus on putting students first, whether that's remedial reading and math instruction, career and technical education, or English language learners.
Very good. And who wants to lead off with some of the thoughts that they have on their participation in this group?
Well, I'll start. We know that there have been issues in the past at the Board of Education. Doris mentioned that one of the things we want to restore is civility. There have been times when the Board of Education seems to have been out of control and seems to have lost focus and seems to have lost its way. And the 5 people in front of you have all agreed that that has to end. The board has to operate in a civil manner, in a cooperative manner, in a way that people can listen to suggestions, discuss them rationally and politely, and then come up with a suitable decision.
And you've worked in the educational field before, and you have experience.
I was an adjunct instructor at Daniel Webster College for 11 years. So I have in-classroom experience. And one of the things that I'm interested in doing is understanding what we are doing to prepare our high school graduates for post-high school success. Are we giving them the tools they need? Are we giving them the education they need? When they leave, do they have the ability to do the kind of math and English composition that is necessary for success in today's business world or in today's technical world?
Very good. And does anybody else want to add a comment?
I want to add a comment. I want to elaborate on this. And we also have to look at our students in the early grades, because if they're not proficient in reading and math, what we do is socially promote them up. I'm using that word, socially promoting them. And then what happens as they get into the higher grades, they're falling further and further behind. And the board meetings that I have gone to, people have to understand that we have the right as taxpayers and citizens of this city to voice our opinion when we feel there's something wrong. We're not disrespecting them. We're trying to have a dialogue and a discussion with them. And for board members to disrespect the public, it's a sad thing. They disrespect themselves on the board, some of them. But the time has got to change, that we have to work collaboratively in the best interests of the students of this city.
Does somebody else want to add to that?
Let me piggyback a little bit on what Bert said and also Paula. Just in the last week, we had a curriculum meeting, and we were presented with assessments, test score type things, evaluating performance. And in all grades, first through 8, this is just a downward trend.
Right.
You'd think that you'd have a lower proficiency in the fall, and then over the course of the year, you'd have better performance in the spring. This actually got worse.
Really?
And it got worse all across the board. And there were many members of the board, and I'll say some of the ones that we would join on the board if we were elected, that were pretty outraged over this. And what I was outraged about was, the scores. But even I'm more outraged is that the administration is not outraged.
Right.
And so when we say we want to focus and make sure people are ready for the workplace or the elementary grades and moving them up and all, that's what they call it, moving them up. That's really a key issue. And it's almost a third of our students are 1 to 3 or more grades behind.
Really?
So it's systemic, and it has no real focus in the strategic plan that's been put forward.
Has the administration kept track of metrics and stuff like that? I mean, things of like
Honestly, I would think they do have the information,
but they didn't present it then. With the
and we
other
only
stuff.
get it a couple of times a year, and the data presented is not fully understood, in my opinion, by the administration, and they like to just jump over it. I'll give you an example. I asked could you get a representative of the company to review this in greater detail, and the assistant superintendent said, "Oh no, we're fish in a small pond. They would never come up here to talk with us."
You were the second biggest fish in this pond.
Well, we're the 10th largest school system in New England also. So I called. Let's just say I think they'll be at the next curriculum meeting.
Good. I see. Greg, did you want to add something to that?
I'm running for the first time here, and I just want a children first kind of policy. Sometimes I think the bureaucracy just thinks it's there for themselves, and they don't actually lose track of it's for the children. And that should be the question at every meeting: is this on the behalf of the children, the decision making that's going on? And I think we need to get back up to basics. I think reading, writing, arithmetic, that kind of thing, ensuring that children leave the school system and are ready for college, and also trade school type of thing too. Like maybe we could get welding in the schools, that kind of thing. So there's like 3 different tracks where students go, but all of them should lead to success in life, and it's extremely important. This is a priority in our society, and we can't have silly bickering on the board and losing track of it's all about the children at the end of the day.
I just want to kind of elaborate what Greg just said. When he talks about success, every child should have that chance to succeed in this world. There's no reason why they shouldn't. And where we have such a massive budget, the budget is basically almost a whole city budget. It's so huge. The question is, with all this money that keeps going into the school system all the time, why aren't we producing better children with the proficiency in the math and the reading? What is the problem here? So are we throwing bad money after worse? Is it a question of money, or is it the question of what kind of curriculum are we teaching the kids? And maybe it's the time to overhaul this, because every time that you need books, the money's never there. It's gone for other things, and you can't get the money back. So that's the biggest question. What are our kids learning, and how are we going to better prepare them, like Greg said, and Howard, and Doris, and Bert? How are we going to prepare them for each grade and to get them, when they're graduating, to be successful, whether they're going to college, whether they're going to trade school, vocational school, or they just want to be an entrepreneur? And that's what we should be teaching them later on, how to become entrepreneurs out there.
A little bit more of how you run your life as both internally and at a company, if you're doing that. Can I just go back a minute? Is there any metric that they have to see the success of the high school graduates? I mean, do they go, how many go to college or to whatever, and are they successful there?
We do keep track of how many go to college, and but I don't know that we keep track anymore of whether they graduate from college. There used to be a lot of remediation work in college, but I think they've changed the names of some of those courses because people were tracking how many students would go into remediation versus college work. So I don't know that we have that metric. But the thing that I find frustrating is when you ask a question, when you see the scores are dipping, and you're saying, let's have a conversation, you get hit in the face with, what's the matter? Don't you respect our teachers? It's like, no, I'm trying to have a conversation about maybe what materials they're using. But it's been so difficult with the current board to get information, to have discussions. You end up having to do right to know requests. And that is just, it's so inappropriate that we have to resort to that. But I mean, it is a tool. But unless we have the information and unless we can have a civil discussion, we can't improve our schools. We're sort of blocked. We're done improving if we can't have debate and discussion and agree to disagree and somehow come to a conclusion.
It sounds like there's a lot of internal problems with just the communication and learning. And as I understand it, you've cut back on your meetings and the time of the meetings too.
We have one meeting a month instead of two. Our
Board meetings.
Board meetings. We have committee meetings, but the full board meets once a month instead of twice. We have 2 hours for a meeting. After 2 hours, we're supposed to vote if we're going to continue. So that's even used strategically or politically. If they don't want to continue with something on the agenda, people just shut down the meeting. And then you don't finish the business of the day. So it's a lot of crazy little policies that they've put in to shut down civil discourse and coming to a conclusion to help the students.
Is it the board the one that sets up the agenda for the day, for the meetings?
The board president is supposed to set up the agenda for the full board meeting in collaboration with the superintendent. The committees have a chair, and they are supposed to set up the committee agendas in collaboration with certain administration. But board members have a right to insert things under new business on the agenda. That's no longer respected.
Really?
I put in 6 things one time, and all of them got, the board president refused to put them on the agenda.
So you as a group want to improve this, obviously.
Yes.
And what are you going to do?
Well, the very first thing to do, believe it or not, is to re-implement Robert's rules and make sure that people talk to the chair. And rather than arguing at each other, with each other, they have to be civil to each other. It's the first step. Once you've got civility, once you have order in place, then you can start discussing things rationally. You can start deciding how much time should we spend on this discussion? Should this particular issue be tabled? Should we continue to discuss it? Should it be brought to committee? We need to give more power to the committees so that they can bring back full reports to the board so that the board can then have a better understanding of all of the issues involved. For instance, not that I want to go down this road, but somebody is going to eventually mention social emotional learning. The question that has to be asked with social emotional learning is, are teachers who do not have professional instruction in either psychology or sociology, are they being tasked with deciding whether or not a child is adjusted normally, a child needs to talk to a consultant, a child needs to learn more about behavior? Who makes this decision? Does a teacher make this decision? Are we allowing teachers who are untrained medical professionals to make medical decisions for our children? Does that belong in the classroom? I have a very simple feeling about this. In the classroom, the only thing that should happen in the classroom is instruction of the subject at hand. Because when the kids leave, and children, when they leave the school, they don't take the social emotional learning grade and put it someplace. Colleges don't use that to evaluate whether or not a student is ready for college. The kids need to be educated in the academics in the classroom. They don't need to be psychoanalyzed by someone who has no experience in psychoanalysis.
So you're talking about this new strategic plan that the superintendent wants to implement?
Yes.
And this is the one that has a budget of, $3.5 to $5 million?
And additional people that are being purchased that are additional hirees that are not there to teach the children. If we're spending money on medical professionals to psychoanalyze kids in school, maybe we've forgotten that kids in school have been kids in school forever.
Yeah.
There isn't much of a difference. Maybe the reason that kids are acting up is that they're bored and that they're not getting what they need for instruction. Howard.
So thank you. So you hit on something you didn't realize how much of a bug it is for me. So with the strategic plan, I had suggested if you really want to improve the school system, you really need to engage the students. You need to find out what they want to learn, and you just bury them in it, and they'll never leave class, and they will shoot like little rockets into their future.
Howard,
And
if I may, I don't want to pull. What does every kid ask? How am I going to use this in real life?
Yeah.
If they can understand how, the lights are going to go on and they're going to get very interested. Remember, I've seen this in class. I've seen it. I've seen the lights go on when kids realize this is cool.
So my proposal was to survey and involve the students. Let each school develop its own plan. Let the kids get engaged, make it a school-wide project, and report back to the district level and engage them in those schools. The only students they spoke to were high school students, the kids that are about to leave, who won't be in the school system when the plan is implemented over the next 3 to 5 years, right? So we left our biggest knowledge base dark. We didn't ask them.
You didn't ask any of the other elementary?
You ask a middle schooler, what do you want to learn? They're going to tell you. These kids, they're amazing. I substitute up in Merrimack in the middle school and in the upper elementary, which is 5th and 6th grade. I'll tell you, I have a great story, but we can't use it now. But I helped this girl build these little footings for something. And then make it bigger and stronger. And these kids, they built something, that was 2.5 feet high out of paper, and just make it bigger. Go ahead, keep going. I even got them, the big sheets of paper you have on the flip charts, and they folded them into origami shapes. And they just built a fort. It was just amazing. Just let them go.
So you don't usually see that, is what you're saying. No,
that was my best day in the Merrimack school. That day was when we let the kids loose like that.
Yeah, I know you did a couple years ago. You did stuff in the national school district,
right?
Too.
Mostly middle school. I didn't do the high school, and I can't do that now being on the board. So I do that up in Merrimack.
But I just wanted to bring up when I went to one of the charter schools here in Nashua, I saw all those things. Because that's what they do. They do very, very well. They excite the kids about education. And they just run, they're kids still. There's a lot of emotional effects out of it. But they're learning. They rank now as the top school in the state. How come we're not learning that in our regular?
Because of the bureaucracy. That's what it is. We have allowed the schools to be taken over, and it's a sad thing with the social emotional learning. I'll get it right. It's a sad thing. You're putting all the money into that versus curriculum, and we need to get these kids ready to go on to each grade. We can't have kids fail at an early age. I had someone tell me a long time ago is that if you want to be successful, it's like building a house. You have to have that good foundation. When I was on the board the first time, the Board of Education, I would always have that in the back of my mind, that foundation. Because if it starts crumbling at an early age, it's going to keep crumbling as they go up. And when you have a child that's 3, 4, 5 years behind in math or reading, how do you expect them to behave in a classroom? How do you expect them to keep up in the classroom? We have failed them. They haven't failed us. We have failed them. And you feel bad for these kids. And how do you get them to catch up? It's almost an impossible thing to get them to catch up now, because where do you begin? And if they're in the high school level, it's a sad thing. And so we, as 5 of us who are running for this board, we are focusing on the core issues here. that nobody else talks about. Other people are running because they have a group that they want to make sure that certain people stay there and the status quo stays the way it is. Well, that's a disservice to the students, to the parents, and to the taxpayers of the city.
You want to say?
I just want to chime in about all 5 of us. Please vote for all 5 of us and don't miss one. It'll cause a majority in the board. And if you want this kind of agenda that we've laid out here, it needs to be all 5 of us in order for us to accomplish these goals.
Okay. Does anybody else want to add to that?
So on November 5th, the polls are open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we're going to be passing around little sheets that's going to look better than this when we get them printed. Take it to your friends, your family, your coworkers, your relatives. Tell them why we are running for the Board of Education, our purpose here. And if they feel that we're the right people, please vote for us, because I know we're the right people. We just have to get the word out to everybody.
Well, that piece of paper that you showed will be shown at the end of this interview, and so people can get a copy of it off that.
If I can expand on that for just a moment, the reason all 5 are needed is so that we can become a majority and we can shut down a lot of the nonsense that's happening on the board. Without a majority of reasonable people, the board is going to continue operating as it has. And as I've said earlier, this board seems to have lost its vision. The board should be an interlocutor between the children and the teachers and the administration. The board should help make sure that problems are resolved. The board should help the administration derive a curriculum that helps success. And the board, so far, has been forbidden from doing a lot of the things that it wants to be able to do, mainly because the other members of the board, the ones that are currently running it, the president, don't have an interest in that. Their interest doesn't appear to be making sure that what happens in the classroom is aimed specifically at making sure that the children get a solid education. Now, in business, that's called a return on investment. What return on investment is the Nashua school system providing for the tax revenue that it gets? We want to make sure that that is a positive ROI.
And plus, I just want to interject here that when a tax-paying citizen comes to the board and they want to ask questions or they say something, that members of that board does not try to shut them down and accuse them of things. And people from the audience shouldn't be screaming out. And the president cannot take control of the board the right way, because that's called my First Amendment right, and it's called everybody else's First Amendment right to come to that board, speak up, and let them know what they feel they're doing wrong, if they like the superintendent or not. And plus, the superintendent has to sit there and listen to comments without interjecting also. It can't be a one-sided affair.
I'd like to just jump back, unless somebody has another comment on that issue. Go back to the strategic plan that is being trying to be implemented. Is there a reason for that they need that? Is there a control problem in the classes as far as how they're taking care of?
Every district is supposed to have a strategic plan. It's part of our state or requirements as a board. And it's usually done by the board. We sort of the majority decided it was an ad hoc committee and put our least experienced person on it as the liaison, and we didn't see what was happening for a long time. We did get it back, but it feels to me by, the questions and the data that was coming back, it was a predetermined idea for social emotional learning, because the questions weren't broad enough. They were narrow, and they got the answers they wanted, and then they're pushing this whole child, like as if the past couple of decades we've been teaching partial children, fragments of children. I don't understand. We've changed our mission to teach the whole child, but nobody defines what the whole child is. I mean, it's just presumptuous that anybody that opposes this must not be for the whole child, whatever that is. But
what bothered me is it's social emotional. It's more. It's not a learning problem that they have to address. It's an emotional problem. The children are not accepting going to school or whatever.
Can I comment on the strategic plan piece? So, as a project management professional, that's the kind of stuff we deal with. So I actually have a clue as to what some of these things should deal with. And as Doris stated, it was taken away from the board by the board majority. They were on the board for around 3 months, and they voted away that responsibility. There's no demographic data in the strategic plan. There's no enrollment data in the strategic plan. There is no, I'm sad, I'm laughing, I'm smirking. There's no financial analysis in the strategic plan. They say they want to hire 57 people in the 5-year plan, which relates to 10 years worth of hiring. I'm still trying to figure out how they did that.
Population is going down in students.
They don't acknowledge the enrollment.
Yep.
So they're not basing the needs based on enrollment. And the biggest cost driver in the district is what we call out-of-district tuition expenses for special education children. We're required by law to provide these services. And on the 4 years Doris and I have been on the board, I would say $300,000 to $500,000 a year we're short. Last year's budget cycle, we added $800,000 into that single budget line. And it's almost $6 million a year. And the strategic plan, at my insistence, includes a reference to it. But the superintendent said, oh yeah, we're going to deal with that in 5 years. And so you wonder why we're frustrated on the board and why rational thought, discussion, evaluation just doesn't happen. Somebody else, because I know we're running out of time.
Well, go ahead.
You know, all these things, it's all about the children at the end of the day. And is anybody asking that question every single time? One thing that was passed amongst our group in an email list was about the reading curriculum. Apparently in Nashua schools, we're using a reading curriculum based off of this 3 queuing method, which has been shown not to work in studies. And so speaking of Paula, where you have that foundation, if you can't read well, that's not a good foundation to be building off of. So there's back to basic things that we just need to get to, really.
Speaking of basic things, are they doing anything with cursive writing?
So that's a great question because, oh boy. So we had asked a lot about that. We were supposed to discuss it last December. They canceled the meeting to discuss that last December. So it never got discussed into the spring at some point in time, which is way too late to make any adjustments for the following school year. That's how they push it off, so they don't have to discuss it. So they did a pilot program, which they asked us to approve, but they never told us that they were doing the pilot and that the pilot included cursive writing. So now we approved the materials they requested. Turns out there's not enough money in the budget to buy the materials they told us we needed. They've selectively purchased materials without notifying the board that we didn't get you exactly what you asked us to buy. And I, for one, don't know if the cursive materials are included in the buy that they are making. I mean, Doris might have some
The
more.
cursive is, we've got the 2nd grade cursive. The 3rd grade cursive is not available yet, and we will get that in a year. But the problem is they chastised us for even suggesting that and said, how could you be so insensitive to our teachers? We'd have to go to professional development and all this, as if no one knows how to write in cursive anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, how are the children going to write their own names? How are they going to decipher the Declaration of Independence? But then after finishing chiding us, it turns out that it was just part of the program that they wanted. It's very frustrating.
We had administrators, superintendent, the two assistant superintendents say to us that cursive is not that important anymore. There's no time to teach cursive in the curriculum, but they have plenty of time to integrate all the social and emotional everywhere. And we're only asking cursive to be generally in the younger,
Seems to me
3,
that
4,
You can almost do that a little homework in
2
a
and
couple
3
of classes.
years.
And the kids pick it up pretty quickly. And so-
Oh, what's even crazier, we have 2 retired elementary school teachers on the board. And even Miss Porter said, oh, the kids love to do it. They really engage. And both of those I'm sorry, I'm smirking. I can't believe it. Both of those 2 people voted against incorporating cursive, making sure we had it. It's just unbelievable.
I'll tell you, I wouldn't want to be a teacher in this district because from one day to the next, you don't know what you're doing when you don't know what you're teaching. And we have a lot of dedicated teachers in the district. And when we talk about the social emotional learning, I'm thinking about it. And, it's a sad thing that you can't give a kid an aspirin in school, but we're going to have a teacher psychologically and take them and sit them down and try to figure out what's working the brain or not. It's silly. It's nonsense here. And if I was a teacher, I wouldn't want to put my name on something like that because I don't have the credentials to do it. And the purpose of school, like we all said, is for kids to go to learn. So when they graduate, they have a background, they have a chance to make it in life. But what we're doing here is we're dumbing them down even more now. Right. It is really a shame. I'm glad my kids are out of the school system because Mom would be there every day.
Well, let's hope you can do that. Before we end, though, I'd like to touch on one other aspect. As a board, have any of you actually gone to the different classrooms and watched the teachers work?
We're not allowed.
Why not?
When the new superintendent came in, he deactivated our ID badges that got us into all the school buildings that we had for years. Without asking, just they were deactivated. We're not allowed to go into the buildings. We're not allowed to talk to the principals. We're not allowed to talk to the teachers. We have to go through the superintendent. He just set up, like last week, we had like 2 days notice. He set up 2 weeks of meetings, morning and afternoon, to cover all the schools. So if you cut your schedule back to nothing, you would be able to go there and you would have a tour by the principal and they'll show you what they want you to see. That's not oversight of the district, and that's what we've been reduced to once a year.
Well, look into the camera. You're the people out there. You elect the board, and the board has control over all this, the superintendent, et cetera. It's time to take it back. You're the taxpayer. It's your children. To lead off of that.
I want to say that when I was on the board, that never happened. We had Joe Giuliano and we had Mark Conrad that was running the district. And we were allowed in the schools. We would even kind of like have a school of our own to kind of follow, to watch. There was nothing like this that's going on the board now. So, and I just want to reiterate what Greg just said. That's right. You're the parents. You need to take control of what's going on in the schools. You need to follow what's going on in the schools. And if you're not happy, come to the board meetings and let the school board members know that, and speak out. That's the best thing that you can do in this city, is speak out when you're upset about anything.
What you're hearing is that there appears to be, and this is the shame of it, an adversarial relationship between the board and the administration and everybody else that's involved. And this is why one of the things we've said is that people have lost sight of the fact that everybody that's here, the Board of Education, the school administration, the teachers, everybody is here for the students. The students are not here for the teachers. They're not here for the administration. We are here for them. And if we have lost sight of the fact that the children are the most important things that we can contribute to, we've lost sight. Everybody says the same thing. My kids are the most important thing in my life. Okay, it's time for the voters of Nashua to recognize that the Board of Education wants that these members These candidates want that. We want children to be the most important thing there is. We want to treat them well. And the adversarial relationship must end.
The adversarial relationship. And folks, we haven't talked about this stuff before today. Just so you know, this is really the first time we've spoken about any of this. And the adversarial relationship that you see is, well, let's just say it this way. I think it's fair to say, I'll say, it's my belief that if the 5 of us are elected by the people in Nashua, it's going to be different.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, the status quo is going to change. And as far as transparency and accountability and fairness, that's been my premise running the first time and now again. The administration needs to be transparent with information and accountable for the results and fair to the employees, to the kids, the parents, the taxpayers. For me, I really simplify it down to that level. But accountability is key. And when you request information, when you request data about test scores or behavior, I asked for behavior data in December. We didn't see it until the spring. And we never really got the full picture. And that's because the current majority allows the administration to set the agendas, set the discussion points. I can't account, I've lost count of how many times we've had a board meeting where we've been given the materials that we're going to hear about at the meeting, which completely violates our policies. We're supposed to get 3 days notice. And they continually allow them to do this. We had a big presentation on all this solar energy stuff, and they gave it to us. They didn't give it to us ahead of time. It wasn't even on the agenda. And the chair allowed it to happen. We're going to do that again, folks. If you see this, watch that curriculum meeting because it's the same solar implementation the city's trying to do. Personally, I'll be voting against it.
And if I remember correctly, they have to post meetings at least 24 hours prior to the meeting, if I remember correctly. And to touch on a point is that no board member and any constituent of the city, the taxpayer, should ever have to write a right to know law to get any public information. It is called public information. And when you have to do that there's a complete breakdown on the board. And the superintendent really needs to be reined in a little bit. And he has to understand he works for the Board of Education. The Board of Education doesn't work for him. There's what they call a POPS manual. That is all the rules and regulations of the Board of Education. And that when he gets his review, the review is by the Board of Ed. So he works for the Board of Education, and the whole process is backwards right now. With the 5 candidates here, we will be able to go in and reverse it and make the board work the way they're supposed to.
Howard, you had just touched on one thing about behavior. Is there, I heard some rumor that they're now eliminating suspensions. They're calling it something else, or there's some regulations on abnormal behavior in the classroom?
I can't, I don't know the direct information you're looking for.
Some teacher had told me.
They may rename things, that's what they do, is they don't call it what it is. But they rename it to something else.
It's kind of hard to find a trace or anything.
Well, we asked information about detentions and even suspensions and even police involvement. Yeah. And that information came about 2 or 3 months later. They don't want to give it all at the same time. It's all available. We have a...
So it's again, just another point that they're not communicating the things.
Well, they resist, they hold back. Yeah. Delay, deny, they do it all the time.
We asked for discipline, and they gave us demographics, they gave us grade levels, they gave us ethnicity. We wanted to know, well, what actually was being done in the classroom. It wasn't until I went to some other legislative hearing that I found out that vaping was a problem. That never came to my attention through the board first. I mean, so when we put in a question, it gets on the superintendent's list. He looks at it 3 to 6 months later, and if the board majority deems it appropriate, then we get the information we're seeking. So we gave up. We just file right to know requests. If we need the information, and even then, it's not always easy to get it.
I'd like to bring your attention to something you asked and let you know that that's exactly the problem. You said that you've heard from someplace else about something else, and there's a room, and you've got people that are on the board that have no knowledge of this. Why is there such a breakdown in communication? What is the reason for this adversarial relationship? And I'll go one step further, and this really shouldn't be. Why are they hiding this? Why isn't this actually out in the open? If we
Thank you for asking.
why it seems to me that if we have to argue, fight, use freedom of information to try to get information, people have lost sight. This is all about making sure that the children have everything they need to be successful, that the first grade kids have what they need to be successful in second grade, and all the way up through graduation from high school, so that when they graduate from high school and I'm an adjunct and I see them coming into the classroom, I don't have to say, why is it you don't know how to spell simple words? Why is it you're having trouble with simple math? I'm trying to teach you, heavy duty stuff. And you don't have the basics that you need. If you're telling us that you've heard a rumor about something and people that are on the board don't know, that means that there's a communication breakdown. That's bad.
The problem, too, is that the persons that I'm hearing it from are teachers who are afraid to bring it up.
Afraid.
Again, that's bad.
So let me, I made a motion at the board to encourage the community, the teachers, the administrators to freely communicate with the Board of Education without fear of retribution, reprisal, that whole thing. The board majority voted against it. Folks, they are out of their minds. They have continuously given up their authority, and they act on the will of the superintendent. He's very persuasive. I have not been in the district office. I have not been in Dr. Mosley's office since January of 2018. Okay? I've been in the building once in the last 2 years. After George Farrington episode, which people may or may not remember, where he was prevented from coming back into the building in a court case, which the city lost. It cost $60,000 to the city to settle that. I don't go in the office, okay? Just to let you know.
Well, I want to tell you, Carl, that I had teachers ask me to run. I would run into them in the grocery stores, and they said to me, we need you back on the board with your common sense. And I'm saying, okay, I thought I retired from all this, and I had enough of this. I'm starting a new career in my semi-retirement life. But when people ask you to come back, it's a compliment because you did something right the first time around, that they're saying that with your experience, you come back and you'll be able to provide it again and ask the right questions and start going through the budget. I used to love to go through the budget when I was on the Board of Ed and when I was on the Board of Aldermen, and just look at those line items. But it comes back to the question again. What are we spending our money on in the district? Why are the kids not getting what they need? Why every year do you have to hear that they don't have enough money for pencils and books and things like that in the classroom, that the teachers have to take it out of their pocket? With a budget the way we have in the city for the school district, every kid should be able to have all the supplies that they need that is given to them in that budget. And every year we hear the same story: there isn't enough money in the budget. It's about time that we sit down, go through that budget, go through each and every line item and see where this money is being spent. Because when I left at the end of the year, if you didn't use the money, you lost the money. So at the end of the year, they would move it into different line items for something else. Enough of this. That should be accountable to every tax-paying citizen in the city. The accountability of the budget and how that money is being spent on those students who are our future. And I just want to say, my kids have been out of school for a long time, and I remember being there, and I would say to them, my kid's still having problems with spelling. We're working with him with spelling. And one of the teachers said to me, don't worry, Mrs. Johnson, by the time he goes into whatever career he's going to be in, they'll have spell check on the computer and he'll be fine. And I looked at them and I said, wait a minute, that's because he was in whole language. My kids went through school with whole language, and I started bringing phonics back in when I left the board. I said, but if he doesn't know how to spell the word and doesn't know the meaning of the word, he can substitute any word in there that looks the same and he doesn't know the meaning. So my kids have been out of school for a long time, and we're still in the same situation back then when I was on the board and when my kids are in school. This is pretty pathetic. It's about time we overhaul this district and the money and how the money is being spent, and it needs to be in the right places for these students.
Okay.
If I can comment, let me just
Okay.
do a quick one on the budget. So another motion that I made this year was to just get about 10 or 15 books from this national organization that has best practices for school board budgets. And I made a motion during the budget process to get, I don't know, $500 or something. And the board voted against learning what the best practices in school board budgeting is all about. That's how crazy. Oh, we have a system. It's been working. In my 4 years on the board, we have never in those 4 years taken just like Paul has suggested, just a very specific, let's justify everything and know what we really need and what we don't, and how can we, look at it. Not done that. They rejected a motion to spend a few $100s to get, I think, 20 books. Maybe it was $600. Whatever it was. And so they're not interested in proper governance. They think proper governance is doing what the superintendent wants. Proper governance is doing what's necessary to make sure the kids get the education they need, and the procedural policy things that we can do to ensure that happens.
Any last comments then? Go.
Well, just off of what Howard said about the no reprisals for teachers and them voting it down, and Paula about the curriculum and teachers. I've met teachers while I've campaigned for previous campaigns, and it's the same story as what you say. They know more about what should be going on in the school system than anyone. The teachers union doesn't represent them. The superintendent doesn't represent them. The teachers are on the battlefield, so to speak. They're on the ground, and they know what the students need, and they need to be able to come to the board with no reprisals and everything, because they're the most important information besides statistics and as you were mentioning before. But besides that, they're the personal connection that we can have with the children and know what their needs are. And the curriculum needs an overhaul according to what individual, not group, individual teachers are talking about. That's who we need to listen to.
And I just want to end it on my end here, is saying that when the student population is decreasing yet and our budget keeps rising, there's a real problem in the system, and we can't get supplies for the kids. But I also want to say that if you like what you hear today, we asking for your vote on November 5th, the 5 of us, because we're the ones who are going to go in there, make the change, and we're the ones who's going to stand up for the students of this district. We're going to stand up for the taxpayers, and we're going to listen to what the parents have to say, and we'd be open for suggestions if they see that things have to change. We're asking for your vote because insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. This is insane what's going on in this school district right now. And we are the ones that can come in, make the change. We're a team. We're going to work together as a team. So on November 5th, please vote for all of us that are sitting here. The literature is going to be up on the screen. The polls are open from 6 to 8 p.m. And we thank you for giving us the time today. And we thank you for your vote in advance.
Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see something happening. Okay, thank you again, and maybe we can get together again right after the election.
Yes.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for having us on.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.